is building some offshore patrol vessels, and one of their jobs will be actually to patrol the waters where cables may be vulnerable. Just as we protect fisheries, so we have to start to protect cables, probably in a more proactive way. Other countries have thought about this, but what the Chief of Defence Staff was saying last night is that we've really got to make this now into an explicit defence requirement. And he was also making the point, really, that the countries providing for the Navy does have quite important roles to play. I mean, a little bit of it was a pitch for the usefulness of the naval assets, the ships and the other technologies that we're investing in for the Navy.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Michael Clark. Absolutely fascinating. Former director of the Royal United Services Institute, where this speech took place last night. Air Chief Marshal Sir Stuart Peach was speaking. And let's just talk more about the cables, because this is a really interesting 20th, 21st century history for us. Nigel Linge is Professor of Telecommunications at Salford University. Hello to you.
Hello, Jeremy.
Now, if we go back a bit, I've got to declare slight interest in this, because I was in Oban in the summer.
Oh, right.
Now, I don't know if that rings a bell with you on this.
Yes, very much so, yes.
Good. Well, I went to the Oban Museum, which is a brilliant place, and they had an exhibit there about how they were the end point of the first telephone cable. Is that right?
That's correct. The first telephone cable across the Atlantic, that was September 1956, went out from Oban in Scotland across the Atlantic. All of the cables, though, that went before that, including the world's first truly global network, were all telegraphy networks. That's dots and dashes of Morse code, and that's a Victorian technology. So the first international cable was really across the English Channel, 1851.
Okay, now, so that was telegraphy, but of course when we think of dots and dashes, we think of Dr. Crippen being caught on the ship with a Morse code message that was sent by radio.
Roundabout.
Exactly, so we have different forms of global communications. Radio communications, certainly ship to shore was always radio and still is. The first telephone across the Atlantic was a radio phone service provided by GPO and using the rugby transmitter, and that was all predated the cables, because trying to transmit the human voice is a complicated electrical signal, and it was only possible to send that by cable once electronics had been developed far enough to allow us to build essentially amplifiers which can sit on the seabed and work on the seabed with untouched, that can boost your voice as it goes across the Atlantic. And the cable you referred to from Oban was called TAT1, Transatlantic Telephone Cable number 1, and it had 102 amplifiers in its length in order to boost the signal there and back. And believe it or not, in its 10 plus years of operation, there was only ever one fault. And that's an amazing achievement, really.
That is amazing, but the other thing I noticed when I read about it in this brilliant museum was that they obviously massive job of work to lay the thing, and then I think it connected with Canada, I can't remember, but you'll know. But at the end of it, you only get the facility for 30 phone calls simultaneously, is that right?
Yes, it was the 36 voice channels. Yes, it connected, so all of the cables went across to Newfoundland generally, because that's the shortest distance to North America, and from there into Canada and into North America itself. Of course, we're talking about the technology there, which was copper cables. Today's fibre optic network, which powers the internet, can carry considerably more equivalent telephone calls than those copper cables did.
After 300 yards, go left on the roundabout and take the first exit, B1293, High Street.
Undersea